Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2.
The commissioner who is supposed to be joining us, he's a few months. He thinks about 15 minutes away. So I am in your hand because we had scheduled for 1 p.m. The commissioner had scheduled for 1 p.m. So it's a matter for consideration. Should we proceed or we can afford him another 15 minutes or so?
Proceed.
Proceed.
Is it a case where he can join in?
I'm just looking forward
No.
I didn't step proceed. I okay with that. TV6 doesn't mind me. His tie cut straight. You tie cut straight.
Very important fourth estate because of the media. I must first sincerely and apologetically indicate that we have arrived substantially late with this engagement because the funeral service of prison officer 1 Nigel Jones, which took place shortly, took a little longer than we anticipated, and of course that was in Siparia. So we had to make our way swiftly but safely to this location, and as a result you were detained a bit, and we thank you profusely for your patience. Today I have with me the very distinguished de facto Commissioner of Police, Mr. MacDonald Jacob, who, as you know, holds the substantive rank of Deputy Commissioner of Police and who is filling the breach as leader of the police service until such time as something else occurs in respect of the work of the Police Service Commission, that having been recently constituted, and I am aware that they are on the job. I intend to have, and he should be joining us shortly as Commissioner of Prisons, the relatives and the officers who were all in bereavement, and in some cases that manifested in out and out tears. He would have been detained a little longer than we did by virtue of his closeness to the prison service and his engagement with it. So he should be joining us very, very shortly. That is Mr. Dennis Pulcher, the Commissioner of Prisons. Yesterday and today, we all shared the experience, the burden of seeing to internment 2 of our officers. One, Trevor Seret, and the other today, Nigel Jones, both reported to have been very efficient, hard-working, loyal prison officers, as well as husband, father, brother, son, and we lost them both to very murderous attacks by yet unknown persons. There was a third attack on a prison officer, which makes it quite justified for the prison service, especially since they lost about 28 prison officers over the last 10 years in similar circumstances. Makes it quite justified for them to think that the prison service is being singled out for attack by the criminal element. And that is perhaps because of the nature of their jobs. While you and all of us are going about our other business, prison officers must 24 hours a day be actually in close contact with, to manage, to organize, to keep on schedule those who the operation of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago and the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago and the prison regulations demand of the prison officers to administer. So they are in daily contact with them to say when you must have your shower, when you're going to be fed, whether you should have a cell phone in there with someone sneaked in, or whether you brought it in while you went to court. That hasn't happened for a while because of COVID and so on. But the bottom line is, you have men in the prison, and to a lesser extent women, a far lesser extent, who are not prepared to submit themselves to the authority of the state and believe they could kill you, kill me, kill relatives, commit crime, burn down people's place, rob, rape, take what is not theirs. And when the operation of law transpires and the police charge them and the court remands them or commits them to a term of imprisonment, they still refuse to adhere to the rules and submit to the authority of the state. They want to break out. And that is not new. That is as old as Methuselah. It has happened in other countries. Right here in the region. It happened in Trinidad. On the 24th of July 2015, by yet unexplained methods, guns and a hand grenade were secreted into the Port of Spain prison at Frederick Street, and they were used to break out of the jail, and they did it successfully. The grenade did not detonate, from the reports that are available to me as chairman at the time of the Joint Select Committee of the Parliament on National Security. I had to deal with some of these issues, so I'm intimately familiar with the details. The hand grenade which was rolled towards the guard post in the prison on Frederick Street did not detonate mercifully, and therefore no further casualties took place. But a police officer, Officer Mina, on duty just outside the prison, lost his life in that hour, in the outcome. The men escaped, ended up in the Port of Spain General Hospital. There was gunfire between them and the police, endangering the lives of patients and visitors. And so that story went. So when we are concerned about the situation as I describe it now, it is not new. It is not foreign to Trinidad and Tobago, and it is a matter, obviously, of deep concern to us. So these officers were serviced today and interned in circumstances. As I said, there was a third attack, but thankfully, that particular prison officer on whom they launched that attack was armed, trained, disciplined, and very able to defend himself and a police officer who happened to be in his company when that attack took place. And from the reports available to me, the police officer got shot in his hand, but both their lives were spared. Otherwise, Mr. Jacob and I and the Commissioner of Prisons and others would have gone to that arrangement as well. I sat this morning, as indeed I did yesterday with Officer Seret at San Grande. Today we were in Siparia, and I saw the mothers and the fathers and the siblings and the friends, and in today's occasion, members, youth, children, teenagers, adults too, members of the prison youth club and the police youth club, both of which Mr. Nigel Jones, PO1, administered on his free time. We would have heard today from his mother, from his wife, from his co-workers, what a great man and husband and father he was. Today we saw a little a fear. Is it a fear? Yeah, no, it's not a fear. His daughter, her name now escapes me. And she was there at age 4. She witnessed his murder. And today, as I said when I spoke, the Lord has a way of doing things. At her childish and tender age, she would not understand the full implications of all that has happened, at least not just yet. But these cold killers actually took her father away in her absolute and real presence. So she would have heard the reports of gunfire. She would have smelt the smoke, perhaps, from the ignited gunpowder. She certainly would have seen the actual event and its aftermath. And video showed her she went wild with love and confusion and trauma. And she ran around that area uncontrollably until a loving passerby, a man in a red shirt, as you media reported it, intervened and comforted that little child. Today, she said a prayer for her father. Today, she danced a little spiritual for her father. And it brought tears to many of us. That is what we are dealing with. So, from the standpoint of the Ministry of National Security, we had previously pledged our full cooperation, collaboration, and support of all the agencies of national security in support of the prison service and in their fight to deal with this criminality inside and outside of the prison. We did so because we, at the level of the National Security Council, we at the level of the Parliament, we at the level of the government, I at the level of minister, understand that those attacks are not an attack simpliciter. They are an attack not only on the prison service, but an attack on the state. Because they are intended to disrupt the operations of the prison and the state, and to break down the effectiveness of law enforcement to do its work. It's a very serious business. In fact, in some places, and even here some people consider this is quintessential terrorist activity, because terrorists do what they do, sometimes for political and other reasons, to disrupt the smooth operation of the state and to interfere with your peace, your safety, and your security. Quite serious. And as a result, a long time ago, we took the decision that we must apply all the state resources in dealing with this. The one thing that criminals have against you, the citizens of this country, and against even law enforcement everywhere in the world, is that they always have it in their hand and in their power to choose when they will launch their attack and where. So they often take you by surprise. When you're just going to pick up your child, or when you're just opening your gate to go home at 10 o'clock in the evening after a hard day's work, or when you are in your bed asleep, or as soon as you come out of the bank, Mr. Businessman, with the week's salary for your workers or the month's salary. Or you with your nice fancy car and your fancy jewelry. They pick their time and their place. They have that advantage on us. So as professionals, the police officers, the defense force, the prison service must understand that all of their training must come to bear. They must be alert all of the time. This is no time to be hanging about the place. It's unfortunate. It interferes with your rights, your freedom. And this is why we say this is an attack on the democracy of the country. But he, Mr. Jones, was carrying his daughter on a shopping exercise. And the criminals, they went. And the criminals intervened. Let us pause to welcome the Commissioner of Prisons, Mr. Dennis Pulchan, please. Thank you. Thank you. And we do understand your reason for your marginally late arrival because you had business at the funeral service, and we appreciate that. Thank you. So, they picked their time. So some may wonder if it happened before or it happened again. Well, they picked their time. They picked their time. But generally speaking, driven by intelligence, I am assured as Minister of National Security that the prison service and all its operatives, the police service and all its operatives, the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force and all its operatives are on high watch, high alert, conscious, based on the intelligence and the activities of the society generally, and they need to be watchful all of the time. And they need to be responsive to the calls and the cries of the citizenry all of the time, in matters small, medium, or large. I did a 3-day stint with a police force in Washington a few years ago. As part of my learning and preparation for my work as a minister of government, I spent 3 days with law enforcement in Fairfax County, and I saw how they operate. A woman called to say a beaver, some little wild animal, was in a basement, and I saw the police react to that as though it were an intruder. I saw them respond. Similarly, I saw a young man who attacked and attempted to kill his mother. This is in Washington. And then, having failed, she got away from him. He slit his own wrist, and he ran out of the house down into a little area in the back there. And of course, I was with that team of police that went to find him with the help of the helicopter and the heat detection mechanisms, and they were able to direct us to exactly where he was there, hiding under some bushes, and we were able to get him, and out he came. He went to a helicopter landing pad, where the helicopter took him to the next hospital very quickly. All this happened in 23 minutes. I've had an opportunity to see that. So that we are, from the level of national security, providing the police service, the defense force, the prison service, our intelligence agencies, the fire service, all of national security, with the resources that they need in order to do the business. With the human resources, recruitment has taken place in the police service, drivers recently in the prison service, 273 prison officers, or 79 earlier in this year. The defense force just recruited about 500 persons. With the human resource, every day we send officers on training, provide them with the technology, and provide them with a clear understanding of the government's policy. That's my role as minister. I don't lock up nobody. I don't patrol with nobody. Sometimes I wish I did, but I don't. That's not my job. My job is to provide the resources to make clear what the government's policy is, to encourage and support law enforcement, and that I can say we do. And that will continue to the extent that Trinidad and Tobago can afford it. So,
I cannot speak to you, I'm on a live.
I am assured, and I will leave
cannot
that
speak to you.
to the Police Commissioner, Mr. Jacob, that the investigation into these matters, when I saw the tears, when I saw the pain this morning, as a former police officer, I must tell you, I wish that I could have joined Mr. Jacob in pursuing those who did this. I would give it all. I'll give it 24 hours a day. I'll sleep if I have to, but I'll pursue them. Because everybody wants justice. This society wants justice.
No, not yet.
The prison service wants justice. The family wants justice. That 4-year-old girl, beautiful little girl, innocent, she wants justice. But justice for us is in accordance with the law, the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, the Constitution, and the moral and ethical standards that we must live by. Some people are outlaws, they operate outside of the law. We are confined by the laws, the Constitution, and moral and ethical standards, the preamble in the Constitution, and that we will do. So I would now want to pass over to Mr. Jacob, who will give us an indication as to the state of affairs with those investigations, because on behalf of you, the public of Trinidad and Tobago, I conveyed to him, I conveyed to the prison commissioner, because he has a team working closely with the police service in this. I conveyed to them both, on behalf of you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, that we want a resolution to these matters. We want it swiftly. So I will now pass over to Mr. Jacob, who will give us an indication as to the state of play in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister of National Security. Welcome, Mr. Pulchan, to Commission of Prisons, to all present here, members of the public. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is truly saddened with the death of these two prison officers, and in addition, the unwarranted attack on the other prison officer, and in the circumstance where a police officer was shot. We have put together a team of officers who are involved in this investigation. This team, involving the homicide bureau of investigation, together with our various technological units, and we are getting the necessary support in doing that investigation by officers in the prison service. We are getting there, and our forensic department is playing a significant role in the approach of this investigation. As you're aware, we had actually detained 9 persons as we commenced this investigation, and they were questioned, interviewed, and certain information was gathered, and they were released. At present, we still have 1 person in custody, and the investigation is continuing. So the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service intends not to leave any stone unturned in order to bring these perpetrators to justice. And in so doing, we decided, in collaboration with the Ministry of National Security, to go in a particular direction. And I just want to make this official statement here, that over some time, we have observed the members of the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service have been violently attacked. The latest being the senseless murder of prison officer Trevor Serrett and prison officer Nigel Jones. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service condemns in the strongest possible way these acts of violence perpetuated against officers of the state. The TTPS is aware of how these officers were actually dedicated to their duty and the way they made the various sacrifices that the officers in all the various protective services normally carry out themselves. And this is to ensure the safety and security of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has collaborated with the Ministry of National Security to offer a reward for anyone who can provide information that will lead to the arrest and prosecution of the suspects involving these crimes. An award of $500,000 will be offered for any information that leads to the successful arrest of these perpetrators. We are appealing to the citizenry who may have information of these offenders to please come forward. We assure members of the public that the information will be handled with the highest level of confidentiality. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, as I mentioned earlier, will do all that is necessary to bring these perpetrators to justice. Again, we have reached a particular stage with our investigation, but whatever additional information that can assist us, we are looking forward for persons to come forward. Very soon, we'll make a significant release as it relates to this and how the process will be conducted in relation to this reward. So again, thank you very much, and we are looking forward for the support of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
So thanks a lot, Mr. Jacob. And we are now available to you for any questions you may have, Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Jacob. Any questions you have, we are disposed to answer. Thank you all very much. Sorry?
Now, we're seeing that these measures seem to be a bit reactionary. We've had prison officers being killed year after year. Sometime on the road, we mentioned the break. Now, the Prison Association has been calling for firearms for officers, but again, it's reactionary. And besides being hardened, it has to be that these prisoners are getting removed out somehow. It's either through some most of the prison, because we have received phone calls from prisoners in the past. It has to be that it has to be somebody's bringing this out to them. So where is the investigation into how these things, how these communications are leaving the prison? I mean, because everything here is reactionary. What is being done to stop further attacks and further acts of crime within the prison system itself? Is it that prison officers are possible as well?
Okay.
Well, yes. Before I ask Mr. Pulchan to answer your specific question, I heard you describe it as reactionary. Well, in some ways, when a crime is committed, the response must of necessity be reactionary. It's a response to something that has happened. So I don't see reactionary as a bad word, as some might consider. But let me pass on the question to Mr. Pulchan. I'm sure he will provide you with an answer. Thank you.
For your question, sir. Good afternoon to the media. Good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago. Let me just say that in the last 20 years, we have lost 28 officers. What we have been doing so far, I've taken up mantle as Commissioner of Prisons on January 28th. We have formed the various groups where we have started searching members, any member who enter the prison service, any member who enter any institution, any visitor to an institution, we are conducting searches. We have arrested pretty close to 18 officers so far, found with contraband. So the law is being implemented as much as we can. We do have a problem that seems to be bringing us closer and closer to our doors. One of technology, where drones seems to be dropping packages within our prison. And that's one of our problems that we are grappling with. And I guess solutions is on its way, because we are working with other agencies to resolve this issue at this point in time.
Let me further add that by way of reaction, the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, which would introduce, debate, and pass, if possible, certain laws in response to developments in the society. Because laws are organic, and laws grow as a consequence of the need in the society. The lawmakers respond by creating laws to deal with things that may not have happened before. 40 years ago, the question of cybercrime was not an issue. Today, we have to deal with that legislatively to allow law enforcement a legal framework to counteract any illegalities. In that regard, Act number 25 of 2019 was passed in our parliament and is on the law books of Trinidad and Tobago if it escaped you. And that, among other things, makes it a criminal offense to engage in any unlawful communication with a prisoner or someone in the prison's custody. It is a criminal offense. I, many years ago, perhaps about 12 years ago, recall driving my car, getting a call. When I answered, it was an inmate. I was wise enough to say, look here, that is an offense, because it was in breach of the prison rules at the time, but didn't have the force of law. But Act number 25 of 2019 now makes it a criminal offense. Once you know that the person is an inmate, like a few days ago there was an interview on a radio station with someone purporting to have called from the prison. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a criminal offense. And taking contraband material, and contraband material is defined by the prison commissioner, and it is listed for all prison officers and all visitors to know. People take chances, but as the prison commissioner say, many civilians and many officers have been arrested and charged for that. And of course, the government's policy, recognizing how dangerous it is for officers to be making communication equipment available to prisoners who can call shots on the outside, as we put it colloquially. Understanding the seriousness of this as a matter of government's policy imposes on the police service and on the prison service the policy to keep the jails free of that kind of thing. And the law of which I just spoke is reflective of an understanding of that.
So that's well. Maybe Minister, you can answer this question as well, Mr. Pulcher. In terms of troops, now, question in the operation. One is, what kind of items are being dropped into? Who is picking it up? Is it prisoners or prison officers? And I mean, if it's prisoners, and the always constant monitoring, 24-hour surveillance, and in terms of communication, what's up with scanners and jammers to block, calls from coming in and out of prison?
I'll start with the last question first. Grabbers and jammers and equipment that is operated by a separate agency of the prison service. I can't speak much on that. What I can tell you is that we have had instances where we have caught drones. We have done examination on drones, and we have found evidence there that could almost lead to an arrest. We also find a lot of information there. Drones carry payload. We have found about 4 cell phones in packages that are carried by drones. Sometimes they flew to windows. Yeah.
And so in other words, so the prison officers might see it, but there are times when you don't catch it.
No, not every time we can detect it. We won't have detecting devices in place. And that's one of the things, that's one shortfalls that we are currently negotiating to get some geofencing in place that will deal with this problem.
But in terms of the grabbers and jammers, are they functional? I mean, are they locking?
I can tell you, sir, that the grabbers and jammers are tools and equipment of another agency. I guess it is functional.
So then, based on what you're seeing, how do you think these communications are leaving the prison? Because besides police officers, you've had murders of state witnesses, and you've been hearing that these shots have been called from within the walls of the prison. And before you go there as well, we're also getting reports that another prison officer was threatened in the last 24 hours. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, shots are being called from the prison, specifically a particular part of the prison, maximum security prison. And what we have been doing, is conducting daily searches. We have checkpoints at the various parts of the prison. We have an entire unit that is designed to search and seize items, and that is being done right now. But like in all jurisdictions over the world, I think that's a problem that all prisons are grappling with. The illegal communication devices, the illegal communication that's done by inmates.
And DCP Jacob, I know there was a call by the Prison Officers Association, prison officers now, and some time ago, that figures were given out to officers. I mean, is this continuing, and is there an issue with, issuing all prison officers with firearms? I mean, is it advisable? What's going on?
Well, as it relates to the issuance of FULs, right, the prison officers will apply just like any other citizen in Trinidad and Tobago, and they go through a particular process. But however, there are other processes within the prisons, right, where the prison commissioner has a certain amount of powers, and he can do particular things. And he may respond now in relation to that, but once we have our FUL aspect is doing, they can apply. And during the past years, we have issued several prison officers, right, with their FUL, the firearm use license. And that will continue as things take off in relation to the whole aspect of the appointment of acting commissioner.
Good afternoon, Tyrell Gittins from the Trinidad and Tobago Museum. Mr. Pulchan, if you could just clarify within what period of time those 18 officers would have been arrested, and Mr. Jacob, if possible, would you be able to give an update on the financial audit which was started after the contracts of several prisons more recently terminated by the GTPS?
If I may, before these gentlemen on that question, the financial audit of which you spoke was instituted by the government of Trinidad and Tobago, a decision of the cabinet through the Minister of Finance. As a part of that cabinet team, I can tell you, it bore no relation to the termination of contracts of anyone. So the link you have just made between those two matters does not exist. It was the decision to conduct a financial audit, as the Ministry of Finance does with state agencies in the public interest on the basis of accountability all of the time. But to suggest that it had any links to do with that particular thing, that does not exist. Let me just make that elucidly, especially being in San Fernando, remembering the great and proud spirit and contribution of the former MP and Prime Minister, Mr. Manning, used to use the word elucidly rather often. So let me make it elucidly clear. There's no such thing, Mr. Jacob.
Well, you got your answer.
I did.
Right? Sorry, I'm telling you, we got his answer.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I'm speaking of 2019, 2020, and 2021. That we have had quite a lot of suspension during that period of time. So once you are caught doing trafficking or involved in illegal activities, due process takes place.
Commissioner Pulcher, Senator Alibaba saying TV6. The issue with the jammers, you're saying that's done by a separate entity. But aren't we paying for that? Is it enough to just say you're not sure if it's working or if it's effective for something that could possibly help the situation?
No, I'm not saying it's not working. I'm saying the authority for the grabbers and jammers is held with a separate authority, a separate agency. I do believe it's working because that agency is cooperating with the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service and the police service as well.
So let me say that Yes, they are administered by another agency. They are working, but I'll tell you, there's a constant battle with technology. People do different things, people try new things, and the technology has to cope with that. Sometimes when we first put in those jammers, there were some issues with them because it not only affected the prison, but it affected households in the neighborhood. And then, as the technology changed, there was some little technological issues and challenges, but they are working and they do contribute to the effort. But of course, with the advent of drones and being able to identify drones and to destroy drones, those are advanced or more recent technologies and capacities. So the struggle continues because those who intend to transship drugs across continents, from South America through the Caribbean to North America to Africa and all over, they are very, very ingenious people. Prisoners are some of the most ingenious people. They have a lot of time to sit and think. Recently, the commissioner reported to us that in a certain section of the MSP, they were throwing salt in the locks because they know, like any basic understanding mind would, that salt does corrode metal and lubrication and interfere with the functioning of locks. I visited a prison in the United States and I actually met a team of experts working on trying to create locks into which prisoners couldn't urine because they were urinating inside the locks with an understanding that the salt in the urine would corrode those locks. They are very ingenious. They bore holes different places, they use different things to make as instruments. They are the most, they volt things, they get large objects inside of aspects of their orifices of their body in order to get it into the jail. People carry around drugs in their stomach and pellets and all kinds of things. So it's a constant fight that requires commitment, will, professionalism, and the technology that is required in today's world. That's what it is.
DCP Jacob, can you tell me or give the public some kind of assurance in terms of this reward? You know, how can they feel comfortable to come forward with information, seeing that prison officers, some armed with, you know, guns? What kind of assurance can you give them to come forward to give information? You didn't give us an idea as to what platforms they can reach out to give this type of information if the reward just announced.
Well, as I mentioned, I said that we will be doing a release shortly that will indicate and assist the public in the manner in which it will be done. So very soon we will make that release to indicate, and I can assure the public that it will be safe and so on. And the question of any leakage or anything that will not exist, we want to give them that confidence. Right? It will be in a similar platform that we operate in relation to Crime Stoppers, but it will even be on that to ensure that the persons who are willing to give that information will be safe.
You all can feel a COVID question?
Say again?
And you all feel a COVID question?
No, I would rather if you direct that to the Minister of Health.
With regards to security.
Oh, I see. What is it?
So I will ask Mr. Hinds and the DCP. So one is, how do you feel about the police enforcement of the COVID-19 rules, especially now that almost everything is open up now, especially now that we're hearing and seeing that bars, especially in rural areas, are filled on weekends, no social distancing and anything taking place. And I mean, the TGPS has a special branch. There was a mass rally or protest. I mean, that has been brewing for days. It happened in Port Spring. Yes, we knew the police responded, but they had to respond to it instead of stopping it ahead of time. I mean, in that space of time, more than 15 minutes, you had a potential super spreader event. So the police enforcement of the regulations, is it sufficient, especially given the type of numbers and deaths we're seeing now, especially with Delta?
That's a good question. I've had reports throughout the COVID reality and experience about enforcement of the regulations by the police, and satisfied that they did issue many tickets and do other things in order to prevent the illegality that surrounded that. Of course, in my honest view, we could always do more. So you've raised the question of productivity for me and work ethic. And I would be bold and frank enough to say that in my view, the workforce of Trinidad and Tobago has not for a long time operated at full throttle, full capacity. And to my mind, the police service is part of this. The media is part of this. The public service generally, and even in elements of private industry in this country. I think we do not always operate at optimum capacity. That's my own view. And on that basis, I believe we can do more. I may be wrong, but that's my view. I've seen pockets of optimum productivity in the public service and around Trinidad and Tobago. I've seen it. So I know it is possible. By way of an example, in 2011, there was an ill-fated state of emergency by the previous government where there were 6 murders in Arima one weekend, a Friday night. And the government of the day dealing with the burgeoning crime problem just as we are dealing with now. And just as all governments in Trinidad and Tobago have had to deal with for the last 30 years. I watched some old newspapers last week and I'm seeing headlines, 2008, 2007, amazing. The same problem, crime, because crime is a function of human conduct, sin, evil, greed, wickedness, murderousness. So this thing about headlines is not new. A state of emergency was launched in order to deal with crime by that government in 2011 it was. And during the period of that state of emergency, I should never forget, I saw the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service go out there and execute 8,000 warrants that had apparently been sitting down cold and dormant with cobweb for a long time. So I always take it that that was an example of how the police service can do it if they wanted to. So I know we have the capacity, but I know in Trinidad and Tobago, you may disagree, but we have an issue with optimum productivity, powerful work ethic, and going beyond the call of duty. It happens in limited cases, limited individuals, outstanding individuals. It happens at the higher levels of the police service. I can tell you, since I came to this desk, Mr. Jacob, I don't know if he sleeps. I don't know if the Prime Minister sleeps. I don't know if at the higher levels we work, people work. But as the thing trickles down, I don't always see it because I get complaints from members of the public that they make a call to the police station or they report something and the police has not been forthcoming. The police has show up yet. I get that. Last night I got a call from a minister of government that someone needed an ambulance with a heart attack to get, and they call in the ambulance and they can't get them. So I asked, what was the problem? And then she told me, reminded me that in this COVID madness, all the ambulances were on the move, and I can understand the health sector is becoming stressed because, again, people do not want to realize or accept that the first vaccination, the first COVID regulations is you, the individual, your own self-protection, your own good sense, and selflessness to keep on your mask like I put it on mine now. To sanitize as I did enter in this building, to maintain distancing as we are doing here. Those are the basic things that will prevent the virus from jumping from one person to the next. There are some basic ingredients. Even as the prison officers come under attack now, and members of law enforcement, every one of them must be their first line of defense by not walking around the place lackadaisically, being mindful of your circumstances, and reacting sensibly to it. But there's where we are. Right, it appears as though you have exhausted all of your questions.
Just one more question from me.
Thank you.
Minister Hinds, as we're just a bit on a tangent, your thoughts on the PNM?
Well, I'm not a tangential man.
14-1
I'm a very
loss in
focused.
Tobago
I'm a very
last
focused
night.
man.
Yeah.
I'm
But just your thoughts as a government minister.
You want me, huh?
Just your thoughts on the PNM defeat of the Tobago THA election last evening.
Well, the PNM is a long-standing giant in the political industry of Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean and the world. We are 65 years old. We've been fighting elections from 1956, when in our first outing as a PNM, we won 13 out of 24 seats in the then Legislative Council, which is now called the Parliament. We have a track record of 25 straight years in government. That PNM, outgoing PNM administration in Tobago was in office for 21 straight years. We have gone places, done things that no other political party has or is likely to do in this country. As a friend of mine, a certain Mr. KJ tells me, you win some, you lose some. We have fought elections and we have won handsomely. There was a time when in 12 seats in Tobago, PNM won every one. We lose some. We've been in opposition. And we revitalize ourselves, rearrange our policies, repackage, rebrand, and we come again to you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So much so that for 78% of the life of Trinidad and Tobago as a nation state, we have been chosen by you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, to be the government of Trinidad and Tobago. A proud record. So, winning is not new to us. Losing is not new to us. We even tie. We had an 18-18 here in a 36-seat parliament. We had a 6-6 in January in Tobago. We won a seat in San Fernando here by a local event by one vote. We call the man who won it 1 vote Lynch. So we have a proud record. So as to answer your question about how I feel, par for the political cause. The people have spoken, we deal with that. We regroup and we'll come again because we are the PNM. But I'll tell you one thing. It is the PNM that brings stability and growth and development to Trinidad and Tobago. And oftentimes when they veer away and they go down the old dirt road, they come right back to the safe, solid hands of the PNM. And that too is a matter to watch at in the not too distant future. Good luck and God bless you. I thank you very warmly. Since that was your last question.